The storm roared into the valley like a living thing, a merciless beast of wind and snow that buried the small town under a relentless white shroud. Streetlights flickered, their glow swallowed by the blizzard's fury, and the air stung with a cold that clawed through even the thickest layers. He pushed through it, head bowed, scarf tight against his face, his heavy boots carving a path through the deepening drifts. At 32, he was a single dad, hardened by necessity, long hours at the lumber mill, a mortgage that gnawed at his savings, and the quiet weight of raising his 6-year-old daughter alone. 3 years had passed since his wife's illness stole her away, leaving him to piece together a life for their little girl. His mother lived with them, a steady hand, but the nights were long, and the ache of loss lingered like frost on glass. Tonight, his only thought was getting home, where his daughter waited, likely curled up with a book or begging her grandmother for one more cup of cocoa. The town was a ghost under the storm's assault, shops shuttered, roads empty, the world reduced to swirling white. His breath puffed in clouds, his gloved hands buried in the pockets of his worn coat. Then, slicing through the wind's howl, came a sound, faint, fragile, almost lost. A whimper, raw and desperate, like an animal caught in a trap. He froze, squinting into the chaos of snow. There, slumped against a lamppost, was a figure, small and frail, barely distinguishable from the drift piling around her. A thin coat, more holes than fabric, clung to her trembling frame. Dark hair, matted with ice, spilled over her face, and her hands clutched a tattered canvas bag, fingers stiff with cold. He stood still, the wind urging him to keep moving, to get home to his daughter. She wasn't his responsibility. But the sight of her, curled, shivering, on the edge of surrender, stirred something deep, a pull he couldn't ignore. He knelt beside her, snow soaking his knees, and called out softly. "Hey, can you hear me?" No answer, just a faint moan, her breath shallow. Her lips were blue, her eyelids fluttering like moth wings, barely holding on. He tugged off his scarf, the wool still warm from his neck, and wrapped it around her, tucking it under her chin. She mumbled, words slurred and incoherent, her head lolling against his arm. She was slipping, and the cold would claim her if he didn't act. With a deep breath, he scooped her up, her body light as a child's but heavy with the chill that radiated through his gloves. She was a stranger, yet he held her close, shielding her from the storm's bite as he trudged toward his apartment half a mile away. The wind fought him, snow stinging his face, but her faint breaths against his chest kept him moving. His arms burned, his legs ached, but he pushed on, the thought of his daughter's trusting eyes and his own promise to keep going driving each step. The town blurred around him, a monochrome haze, until he reached the weathered brick building that was home. He shouldered through the door, the warmth of the apartment hitting like a shock. His daughter peeked from the living room, her brown eyes wide, clutching her stuffed rabbit, its ears worn from years of cuddling. His mother, a retired nurse with a no-nonsense air, was already at his side, her sharp gaze taking in the stranger's condition. "By the heater, now," she said, grabbing blankets from a closet. He set the woman on the couch, her body still trembling, snow melting into puddles on the hardwood. His mother tucked hot water bottles against her sides, muttering about hypothermia protocols, while he stoked the fire and put a kettle on. His daughter hovered, curious but quiet, sensing the weight of the moment. "Is she okay, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice small. He managed a nod, though he wasn't sure. He tried the clinic, but the phone lines were dead, the storm cutting the town off from the world. They were on their own, the three of them, four now, with this stranger who'd been delivered by the storm. His mother worked methodically, checking the woman's pulse, peeling off her soaked coat to wrap her in dry blankets. He boiled water, made tea, and warmed soup, the familiar motions grounding him. His daughter, braver now, crept closer, offering her rabbit. "It keeps bad dreams away," she said, tucking it beside the woman's arm. The small gesture made him pause, his chest tightening with pride in something else, hope, maybe, that they could help. Hours crawled by, the storm's roar a constant drone outside. He checked on her, watching as color crept back into her face, her breathing steadying into something less fragile. His mother nodded, satisfied. "She'll pull through," she said, then retreated to her room, leaving him to keep watch. By morning, the woman stirred, her eyes opening, sharp, green, and wary, like an animal assessing a trap. She tried to sit up, wincing, and he was there with a mug of tea, steam curling in the dim light. "Easy," he said, his voice rough but kind. "You're safe. You're in my place. Storm got you good." Her voice, when it came, was cracked, raw from the cold. She spoke haltingly, piecing together her story. She'd been drifting, hitching rides across the state, no real destination. A missed bus left her stranded in the town, and the storm hit before she could find shelter. No family, no one waiting for her, just a string of bad luck that had landed her here, half frozen and at their mercy. She didn't offer a name, and he didn't ask, sensing the weight of whatever she carried. Instead, he handed her soup, which she took with a quiet nod, her hands steadier now. His daughter, now fully awake, climbed onto a chair nearby, chattering about school, the snow, her favorite cartoon about a talking dog. The woman listened, a faint smile breaking through her guarded expression, softening the sharp edges of her face. Over the next 2 days, the storm locked the town down, roads impassable, power flickering. She stayed, claiming the couch, her strength returning with each bowl of soup, each hour by the heater. She slept a lot at first, her body recovering, but by the second day, she was up, folding blankets, washing dishes without being asked. She moved quietly, like she was used to making herself small, but her presence filled the space in ways he hadn't expected. His daughter took to her immediately, dragging her into games of checkers, showing off crayon drawings of lopsided houses and smiling suns. The woman read to her, her voice soft but steady, weaving stories with a warmth that made the girl giggle and lean closer. He watched from the kitchen, stirring coffee, struck by how natural it felt. His mother noticed too, her raised eyebrows saying more than words, her approval clear in the way she handed the woman a fresh towel or asked her to chop vegetables for dinner. Small gestures, but they wove her into the rhythm of their lives. He learned bits about her, not through questions but through moments. She knew how to fix a leaky faucet, her hands deft from some past life she didn't explain. She hummed old folk songs while cleaning, then stopped when she caught him listening. She laughed at his daughter's silly jokes, her eyes crinkling, but there was a shadow there, a story she wasn't ready to tell. He didn't push. He had his own shadows, grief for his wife, the fear of failing his daughter, the endless grind of keeping their small world afloat. When the storm finally broke on the third day, the sun pierced through, melting snow into slush, and the town stirred back to life. She could have left, her strength returned, her bag packed. But she lingered, sitting at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the mug's rim. He saw the hesitation, the way her eyes darted to the door and back. "You don't have to go," he said, surprising himself. "There's work at the diner down the street. Owner owes me a favor." She looked at him, searching, then nodded. She took the job, slinging coffee and pie at the diner, her quick smile earning tips and curious glances from regulars. She rented a room above the hardware store, a cramped space with a creaky bed, but it was hers. Days turned to weeks, and she became a fixture in their lives. Sunday mornings meant pancakes at their table, his daughter flipping them with messy enthusiasm while the woman teased her about batter on her nose. Park walks became routine, the girl running ahead to chase squirrels while they trailed behind, talking about small things, weather, books, the town's quirks. Movie nights followed, the three of them crammed on the couch, popcorn spilling as his daughter laughed too loud at animated antics. He hadn't meant to let her in. After his wife, he'd built walls, poured himself into his daughter, his work, leaving no room for anything else. But she was different, not a replacement, not a fix, but something new. She carried her own weight, her own scars, hinted at in quiet moments, a runaway childhood, a bad marriage, dreams that didn't pan out. She never dwelled, instead bringing stories, humor, a way of seeing the world that made him pause. She taught his daughter how to braid daisies into crowns, showed him how to listen when the girl rambled about her day. His daughter bloomed, her shyness fading, her laughter filling corners of the apartment that had been silent too long. He felt it too, a shift in himself. The weight of grief didn't vanish, but it lightened, like snow melting under spring sun. He caught himself watching her, how she tucked her hair behind her ear, how she hummed while washing dishes, how her presence made the apartment feel like a home again. His mother, ever watchful, said little but smiled more, her knitting needles clicking as she watched them all grow closer. One evening, months later, they sat on the porch, the air cool but soft, spring's green creeping into the valley. His daughter slept inside, sprawled across the couch, her rabbit tucked under her arm. The woman leaned back, her eyes on the stars, a faint smile playing on her lips. He realized he couldn't imagine her gone, not from the town, not from their lives. She wasn't just the stranger he'd pulled from the storm, not anymore. She was the laughter at breakfast, the steady hand braiding his daughter's hair, the quiet company on nights when the world felt too big. She was their turning point, the unexpected light that had thawed their frozen days. And as they sat in comfortable silence, the stars bright above, he knew this was no longer just his story, or his daughter's, it was theirs, a new beginning carved from snow, warmth, and time.